Everyone knew that the mayor had been too timid to pull down houses that might have created fire breaks until he was directly ordered to do so by Charles. It certainly helped the royal image, though it didn't help London much. The old, rotting, diseased structure was purified by an inferno that simply burned the place away as thoroughly as if it had been blasted by a nuclear weapon, and a lot more cleanly. And the new city that arose was a classic image of the political settlement of the restored monarchy. The old medieval structures had gone, but Christopher Wren's plan for a brand new city of piazzas and arcades was rejected. That was the sort of Renaissance princely city that existed on the continent. They were the stages on which state ceremonies could be impressively performed by grand leaders, not needed here. Wren was allowed to build a new modern cathedral and a swathe of churches in which altar, pulpit and congregation are positioned to be equally important, not too Roman Catholic, not too Puritan. But the old street plan was retained. Everyone could rebuild their own place on their own plot, and the narrow streets and little alleys of medieval London that still existed in everyone's memories regrew from the ashes. Even now, neither German bombs nor modern developers have quite destroyed them. There mustn't be another fire. Laws would insist on flat fronts, no overhangs, more brick. But the old city that had no overall plan, not even a basic map, reappeared with modern improvements designed not for a new life, but for a better continuation of the old one. Exactly. There was a general desire to better continue things as they had once been, rather than invent something new or imitate something foreign. There was one other marker in the rebuilt London that showed what kind of country this now was. This fine column. It marks the site where the fire had begun. It shows the destruction of the city. There's Charles surrounded by liberty, genius and science, giving directions for its restoration. And there was originally an inscription explaining that the fire had been deliberately begun by papists.
In order to the carrying on their horrid plot for extirpating the Protestant religion and our English liberty, and the introducing popery and slavery.
It was nonsense. But a French watchmaker was hanged for his part in the non-existent plot. Robert Hubert. He wasn't in London when it happened. There was a pathological fear of papists. Awkward. Charles had a pension from the King of France given when he'd promised to convert to Roman Catholicism. The trick to being a king in this situation was, Charles understood very well, not to say exactly what his job was. There was a parliament, and it was beginning to form parties, one pro-monarch, one anti. But Parliament didn't actually rule the country. That was done by the king's ministers, a kind of cabinet government, referred to as a cabal, which meant that Charles wasn't seen as entirely responsible for things going wrong, which they quite often did. The Earl of Rochester wrote a mock epitaph on Charles's bedchamber door. Here lies our sovereign lord the king, whose words no man relies on, who never said a foolish thing, nor ever did a wise one. Charles saw it next morning and said, "Quite right, my words are my own, but my acts are the acts of my ministers." Charles died in 1685, 54 years old. On his deathbed, he converted to Roman Catholicism. He had no legitimate child left alive. The next in line to the throne was his brother James, who was already a Roman Catholic.